Bruce, thanks for coming. Torbjörn, Bruce, Harry, Paul, Kniep, good to see you. Good morning. Rachel from Canada. Rachel's good evening. Everyone else is good morning. And Harry's good afternoon. Torbjörn, I went to the post office to send you some books, but they wouldn't let me. They said that Norway is not accepting parcels from Australia, so the post office wouldn't accept it. So I'm very sorry to say that. We'll work something out eventually. But anyway, Alan, Urs, Daniel, good to see you, man. So unfortunately, I can't send it to you, Torbjörn. That's a real bummer. Rob from Tassie. We've got Tasmania all the way up to Norway. How about that? That's kind of almost the opposite side of the world when you think about it. Yeah, sorry, Torbjörn, but we'll work something out. You know, I've got the package there for you, so we'll see what happens. So today I wanted to talk about survival shapes and what that even means. Tell me what you think that means so I can open the discussion that way. But before I get started, just a shout out. Us, good to see you, buddy. Thanks for coming from Indonesia. Before we get started, just a shout out to the Patreon family. Harry's joined recently. Thanks everyone who's Patreon. Your support is what allows me to keep doing this, and things are not getting easier. We just thought that it'd be back to normal by now, but this virus is causing trouble. They got another big bad outbreak in Victoria, and it may end up. Whoa, Herman, congratulations, man. You got a son due on Wednesday. That's fantastic. Congratulations. Good on you. How exciting. My first child, my son, came 2 weeks early and I was in Japan. So I missed the birth. Urs, Mike, you've got all the rain. We're not getting any over here. I answered your comment too, Mike. I don't know if you saw it yet. But anyway, I tried to answer your comment the best I could. I hope that worked. So anyway, talking about survival shapes. But before we do, like I said, shout out to Patreon. Thank you so much. Things are a little challenging at the moment because I'm getting the book ready. I've got the logbook ready and I'm sorting orders out there. But the Budo Karate book is in the final throes, which means rush, rush, rush. I've got some great stuff for the Patreon family too. And I have to admit, I've got about 6 things and they're all partially finished, but I keep having to put them on hold until I sort this book out. But anyway, I appreciate your support. It's very, very, very kind of you and very helpful. I know there's lots of people who maybe aren't, who like to watch, who aren't. I'm just going to turn the sound up if I can find it. Oh, it's up pretty high. Who aren't members of the Patreon family, that's okay. But if you, if you enjoy the videos, share the love. The website's getting close. That's very exciting. We've only got the framework up at the moment, but we're populating it now. We'll be putting the order pages up, information pages, and then we're getting the membership website going there as well. So anyway, if you're not a subscriber, please subscribe and like, and hit the notification bell. And by all means, the best things that you can do by far is just share the link with people and just say, hey, check this old bloke out. He thinks he knows what he's talking about. Someone made an interesting comment the other day because I like people to go to the KRT lads. That's the boys over in Europe there. There's Wes and Darren. They do a fantastic job and their instructionals are always very, 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 very good. So get along, check them out. I'll just put one link. This is the link they had for Masaki Fuji, and he did a great session too. And so that'll give you a link to the KRT boys. But someone made a comment which I really appreciated, but I think it's probably not a bad comment. You see, when I was a kid, if I wanted to go and train somewhere, there was one jiu-jitsu school on the Gold Coast, and it was, hey, Marco, how are you? And Damien, good to see you. And it was run by an old fella. He wasn't as old as me, but he certainly had filled his age, if you know what I mean. You know, and he didn't even look fit and strong or anything. So as a young fella, I walked in and I walked straight out again. I wanted someone fit and strong. Then I met my instructor, Frank, his nickname was the Pocket Tank. So that tells you everything. Fit and fast and strong and super, So I recognize that when people, they click on here and then they're gone in a second because I see I'm an old bloke sitting on the ground. Yes, it was, and I missed it. I'm so sorry. I fell asleep before it started, Frederick. I'd planned to be there for it, but it doesn't start till 11 p.m. here. And on Saturday, 11 p.m., I was in bed, sound asleep. Sorry. Well, actually, I was on the sofa, sound asleep. But anyway, and someone made a comment that it's a nice mix to take the KRT boys for their fitness and their instructional and their technique. And Darren takes you through some fantastic flexibility work. Us, Ketzi, good to see you, mate. And Wes, and they combine. They get a guest along, and the three of them can motor along, and they'll do a technique and then an exercise. Then the next guy will do an extension to the technique, then an exercise, and they'll keep rotating. So if you're keen to get some really good, solid physical training, by all means, go and join in the KRT boys. You should be doing it every day, really. But my friend contacted me and said he loves doing the KRT and he likes coming to my sessions too, because even though I don't train hard, he says that the balance of the two is really quite nice for his training. So that's a fair call. So I'm going to talk about the survival positions, survival shapes. What does that mean? And I don't just mean survival shapes in one fighting range. I mean survival shapes in all the fighting ranges. Okay, and this is kind of fundamental to what we call the Core 54 in our training, where we have the 7 stages of Kumite, which is fundamentally based around what we call the default position, and that's a fairly fundamental universal shape. Your dominant head position, your head chest concave, your elbows forward, your hands up, your knees bent, your legs shaped to take kicks to the leg, kicks to the body, and then you work your defensive shapes in that position to deal with the fundamentals. Well, we look at the 80-20 when we do that. As you know, Pareto's law says that 20% of what we do give us 80% of the results. Well, it's Clarence. We're all continents now. All we need is Leo. Leo's in Colombia and South America. If Leo comes along, we'll have every continent on Earth covered. So that the survival, the fundamental defensive shapes are the stand up from the default position. What you do against the 80-20. 20% of everything gives you 20% of what you do gives you 80% of the results. So we work on 8 fundamental punches, 8 fundamental kicks, and they give you pretty well the source of everything. So, like, for example, the 8 punches are simply the front hand jab, and it can be to the head, and it can be to the body. The hook, the uppercut, and the rip. Okay, and they're the 4 off the left hand. And then the right hand, you've got the back straight, you've got the overhand straight, you've got the body rip, which is a kagi ski in Japanese, which is different to the front hand rip. It's a different technique. Okay, and you've got the elbow. Now, they're the basic 8 hand techniques. If you work on your shapes and you keep a record in your logbook, okay, and you put this section in the back here, see this section where you're keeping a track of your skill work, you see. Well, and you can put the techniques here, the 8 basic punches, the 8 basic kicks, and keep a record of them and work them. And don't just work the skills, but also work the defense of those skills. Now, the 8 kicks is the front kick, which is both the snap front kick and the pushing front kick, like the teep in Muay Thai. And then you got Maishigeri to the leg, Maishigeri to the body, Maishigeri to the head. And I treat them as 3 different kicks because just because you can do one doesn't mean you can do them all. And the setup for each of them is very different. And in the survival shapes, what you're talking about is the ability to read a technique. So the survival shape for a body roundhouse is very different to the survival shape for a Jodamawashi head kick roundhouse. Okay. And then you've got the back kick, which is a straight back kick. Have you seen that video of Joe Rogan? You know, Joe Rogan's a funny guy, and I believe he just sold his podcast to someone. Who was it? Apple or someone like that. It might have been Apple for like $300 million. I mean, dang! Once I get that podcast going, you Patreon folks, you could keep your money, and you can just come and visit, and I'll pay for you to come out. But Joe Rogan, he does that great podcast, has some interesting things, has some controversial visitors, you know, flat earth crowd and things like that. But he himself is a very intelligent bloke who makes some good comments. And he also has Spotify, was it, Herman? There you go. Just sold his podcast for $300 million to Spotify. And he has a blinder of a straight back kick because he's a high Taekwondo rank. And his back kick is absolutely one of the best back kicks I've ever seen. If he hit you with it, I swear, it'd knock you into tomorrow. So that straight back kick is also one of the kicks, and also the spin back kick, because it's obviously a completely different technique. And then the knee kick is one of the 8, and then the axe kick simply before, because if you don't know how to deal with the axe kick, you're going to get caught, because it's very awkward and comes out of nowhere if you're not used to it. So they're the 8 punches and 8 kicks, and you learn your survival shapes. In other words, your defensive drills against those 8 and 8. Okay, so that's not really a survival shape. They're defensive shapes, and we'll go over them in a sec. But the survival shapes are the fundamental shape that you have to deal with, and you have to understand. What's Kenneth? Good to see you. You have to deal with and understand in all the different ranges. Now, remember, I told you that time that I had too much time in my hand, and I went through all of Solsai's books, and I counted the techniques, basically the technique of his techniques that he taught. Only 28% of them, okay, or less than a third, were actually stand up in range 1 kick range and range 2 punch range. The other 72% were in the stand up grapple range, the blocking headbutt elbow range, the grabbing stand up range, and also the ground range. Okay, and of those, the vast majority of them, over nearly 60% of them, were in range 4. Range 4 is the stand-up grapple. In Japanese, they often call the grappling the gyakute. Oh, I've got some good news too. I'm not doing Wednesdays, but I've changed my mind, at least for this week, because young Ben is coming up, and Ben's going to join me on Wednesday, and he's going to join in the session with me. He'll do all the physical things that I can't do anymore, but it will also demonstrate a lot of these survival shapes for you in terms of 2 men, not just one person doing it alone. But I'm going to run through the survival concepts today, and then on Wednesday, make sure you come back Wednesday, because Ben will be along. He's going to join in, and we'll do a great session with the 2 of us together. So the survival shapes in the stand-up, basically there's 1. The defensive shapes are different. The defensive shapes deal with the 8 fundamental punches, the jab, the overhand, the uppercut, the elbow, the rip, and then the leg kicks, the kicks, the Jodamawashi, the back kick, the spin back kick, and they're different shapes. So we'll go through those today, basically with 1 man, just myself, 1 person, and then when Ben comes on Wednesday. Yeah, look, I went on to Facebook because I just thought I'd experiment rather than come here on Wednesday last week. I popped into Facebook and do a session, and Facebook all of a sudden pulls a lot of people. I think more people are current on Facebook than they are on YouTube, because when they're on Facebook and they're a friend, well, then they get the message. Oh, bugger. Damn, Mike. I hope that doesn't. Yeah, this is the first session I've come back downstairs since we had the gremlins. So sorry about that. But anyway, look, let's try to cover this. Even if the session goes a bit shorter, let's try and cover this. So basically, when we talk about survival shapes, we have to first of all ask, survival against what? Yeah, there is a lot of distractions. It was clear though, Harry. Hey, I noticed that there wasn't the same level of streaming problems, and Mike's just mentioned that we have some freezers now. I don't know that there's ever going to be a solution unless I move the. I'm just thinking right above the floor here, I might be able to move the router there, or maybe it's just the rain in Perth. It could be so, because I know when I've had problems in the past here, Mike, generally it's because of the rain here. Okay, so 5 ranges. Defensive shape for range 1 against kicks. Defensive shape for range 2 against punches. Defensive range against for range 3 against headbutts and elbows. Obviously, it's a very different. And one of the things you notice about bare fist fighting is you can't fight like a boxer, because you can't block you can't go like this and block the hook or the right cross, because you'll still get knocked out, obviously. Yeah, it could be just you, Mike. But when you're in the headbutt elbow range, the closer, the better. Obviously, if someone is threatening to headbutt, the easiest thing you can do is put your head on their head or put your head on the chest. You close the gap. I had a situation many years ago, a little bit of a story, where there was a particular martial art here on the Gold Coast who was bad-mouthing other styles and minimizing karate, minimizing these things, saying they were the best and no one had a solution. So me being the patsy that I am, I rang them up and availed myself of their free lesson. I may have mentioned this before, but anyway, I went along and the guy said that no one has a solution for what they do. And I said, well, I'm old and grey and my eyes are dim. I reckon I've got a solution. And he said, well, what's that? And I said, no talking about it. You come at me with what you got and I'll see if my solution works. And yeah, unfortunately for him, it did. But the point was, the first thing I did to neutralize his ability to get power was simply step in and put my head right here, under his neck, on his chest with pressure, so that he could no longer hit me. Us, Gaz. Us, Bisman. Okay, so, and then the rest, you know, he started to eye gouge, so and then we ended up on the ground. And you know, if you're a stand-up fighter, you don't know what to do on the ground, you're in big trouble. It's that simple. Sosai made that very clear in This Is Karate and in numerous articles that he's written over the years. Basically, he said, look, first of all, he said, a karate man, you don't have the right to call yourself a martial artist unless you are familiar with the fundamentals of all the different fighting arts. So you don't have to be a master of wrestling, but you sure as heck have to have a fundamental idea of what to do if a wrestler tries a double leg on you or a collar tie. You know what, the wrestlers, there are 2 types of wrestlers, basically, Greco-Roman freestyle. Freestyle, generally, they'll come in with collar ties and they'll take your legs. And there's no one in the world can stop a good wrestler's double leg. But at least you have to have a fundamental. We're not talking about being a master against Olympic gold medal wrestlers. Or even silver medal. I've got 2 teeth missing up here, one on this side, one on this side, from my training with a fantastic bloke who taught me a lot. His name's Dan Henderson. He was a silver medalist in the Olympics in Atlanta, I think. But anyway, he cross-faced me once, and then he I was down like this, and he came on top of me and dug his fist up under here just with pressure. Their pressure is so immense. And when I took my mouth guard off, 2 different occasions, a couple of weeks and maybe a couple of months apart, and he was just doing what he does. There was no malice whatsoever. He was actually probably going gently. But when I took my mouth guard off, little bits of my tooth started to fall out, where he just completely annihilated my tooth with the pressure of his crossface. Anyway, so the point I was making about that story was this guy said no one had a solution for what they do, and all I simply did was put my head on his chest. It was that simple. So you have to realize that every range has its survival shape. When you're dealing with headbutts and elbows, there's a good friend of mine, I'll write his name. All these kickboxers always have nice nicknames. His nickname is Carnage. Go and check out his videos. He must have knocked out more guys with elbows than I've ever seen in my life. I refereed him once, and he hit this guy with an elbow, and I swore the guy's head was about to explode. He's devastating with elbows. So there are people with elbows and not. Some of my best results in unfortunate confrontations when I was a young bloke and getting in trouble, working on doors and so on. And I have to say, every single situation I ever had was in a door situation. But anyway, some of the best knockouts in the world I ever had were with elbows. So if you don't know what to do with an elbow, you're in a little bit of trouble. Range 3, get those elbows covered. Yeah, it's a beauty, and he deserves it. Cover elbows, headbutts. Get your chin down. Get your head lower than his head. That's the easiest way to avoid a headbutt. If your head is equal to his head, you're in trouble, because generally the rule is they'll headbutt with that against that. So if you want to headbutt someone, headbutt them below their eyebrows with something above your eyebrows. That's a simple rule. So if you can get lower than their chin, you're going to avoid a lot of hassle with headbutts. And as they start to shape up for the headbutt, you'll see they change their body. Well, then you just get ready just to put your head towards the chest and take them down. Okay, so there are survival shapes for each range. Survival shape in range 4, which is the stand-up grapple and the throwing range, clearly is about mainly play range 4 survival games where we'll work grips. We're there, we're constantly looking for grips and breaking the grips, and to get the collar tie, you've got to get up. We'll demonstrate all this on Wednesday with Ben. So that's range 4. So essentially for range 4, it's about maintaining balance. Range 1 for balance is when you're the kicker, you want to maintain your balance. Obviously, if you're the defender against kickers, they got their foot off the ground, you need to take advantage of that and upset their balance. So if you can stop their foot from getting back down. So that's why when you're doing stuff, boom, you get this idea of dragging the leg and twisting and breaking their balance. Range 2, you can make usually in range 2 with the punches. You watch Lomachenko or even Floyd Mayweather, and the way they make people lose their balance simply by footwork. They'd move, boom, boom, and the guy go to throw a punch, and they'd overbake the punch, and they'd lose their balance. Okay, range 3 is similar. If you can get under someone, get under the head range, get under the elbow, tight, cover, and then take them down, make them lose their balance. The objective of range 1, 2, and 3 is not necessarily to make them lose their balance. The objective of range 1, 2, and 3 is impact. You're trying to knock them out with a kick, a punch, a headbutt, or an elbow. Range 4, the objective is different now. Range 4, the objective is to break their balance. You're trying to get them on the ground. Okay, that's the stand-up grapple in range 4, unless you want a dirty box where you get the collar tie and you start to stand up and box. But generally speaking, range 4 is about breaking their balance, taking them to the ground. So you have to be defensive. You can't allow them to get dominant grips. So the whole thing becomes a game of grips. If you have a gi on, they're going to be getting grips. So you watch the Olympics, and the whole thing is about preventing the other guy from getting the grip. So they'll even come in for the fight, and it's grab here, grab there, grab the lapel, grab the lapel. So what they'll do is they'll even come in and they'll defend their own lapel whilst they're trying to get dominant grip. And if someone gets that lapel grip, they'll break it off. And I can tell you now, one of the best habits you can ever develop when you're beginning to learn how to deal with grapplers is learn to break their grips. If they get the grip on, learn to break the grip. If you get the grip, bang, there's simple ways you can do it. If they get a grip on your wrist, never allow them to dominate that wrist. You've got to counter the grips. And then you move to a range five, which is on the ground. So you either took them to the ground or they took you to the ground. If they took you to the ground, well, you need to scramble fast and get back up. If you took them to the ground, you want to know what you're doing. Either finish them up and create space or control the space. Okay, now survival positions. Growing up in England, headbutts were known affectionately as a Manchester kiss. Isn't that funny? We used to call them the Liverpool kiss, even though we're in Australia. We call the groin shot the Christmas, the Christmas, because you had a handful of nuts at Christmas. But the headbutt was always the Liverpool. Isn't that kiss the Manchester? Yeah, basically, I'd say headbutts are a specialty of you guys over in England, Mike. That's what you guys are good at. So on the ground, the survival shapes take a completely different meaning. And I really think that this is always the best place for a stand-up fighter to start when dealing with the ground. It only takes... Yeah, right. Everything that's ever been said about all of us is a lie, you know that. Unless you were a witness, it was just all made up. My dad used to say, I refuse to make comment on the grounds that it might incriminate me. So, ground survival. It's so important for stand-up fighters, yet we ignore it. And the reason we ignore it is it's like the elephant in the room. We don't want to go near it. We can spend 30 years doing karate, and literally someone who's been training for 3 months takes us to the ground and completely neutralizes us. It's sometimes karate people address it from the viewpoint that, no, you don't need to learn that because it's all here in the kata. It's all in the kata. You do this, well, actually what you're doing is you're locking the arm. You do this, it's a lock. You do that, it's a throw. Well, from my experience, from my personal experience, the best people at doing those locks and throws are the people who've spent time doing judo and grappling and things like that. And we need to also keep in mind that a lot of those old karate masters were also very high ranked in judo. Okay, so in fact, you look at some of you look at the history of some of the great masters, and they were, I'd almost, even Masayama, of course, did his judo and boxing and so on. He was a light welterweight boxing champion of Seoul in Korea when he was a kid. So the point is, look at that. There you go. Eiichi Miyazato sensei, who's Mike Clark's teacher, was an 8th dan Kodokan judo. Well, you know that is going to have an influence on your karate. One of the stories the Aikido teacher told me was the fierce and reputation of Korean fighters because of their ability to use the headbutt effectively. Well, there you go. That's interesting. I knew a boxer who reckons the best headbutters in the world were Korean boxers. Well, so anyway, there you go. Look, Miyazato sensei, 8th dan judo. Absolutely. And so many karate masters have a background in judo. It tells you something. A lot of them have a background in kendo. You know, Funakoshi Gichin, the so-called father of karate in Japan, who was the one that was most responsible for taking karate to Tokyo. He had a son named Gigo, and I think I may have spoken about him already. But Gigo died very young. He was actually, even though Masayama has a reputation for training with, or has the history of training with Funakoshi Gichin, he actually said that he spent more time training with Funakoshi Gigo, his son, because when Masayama started training at the Shotokan, Funakoshi Gichin was already 70 years old. So he was doing arguably doing old man's karate. I can tell you now, if I'm still teaching at 70, I'm not going to be doing the long, deep stances. And if I was a 70-year-old Shotokan master, you can be certain I'm not doing the long, deep stances. So it was quite well known that at the Shotokan dojo in Tokyo, you had Gigo, who was in his 30s, and absolutely a phenom, who really was the one responsible for so many technical innovations and skills that were introduced into Shotokan. He was teaching, like in the evening, and Funakoshi Gichin Sensei at 70 years old, and 71, 72, that age, he was teaching during the day. So naturally, a young Masayama, he was probably, you're talking about 16, 17 years old, 18 years old, 19 years old. He's going to be attracted more to Gigo, Funakoshi's son, even though he trained with both of them. Now, Gigo was long, deep, strong stances, and he was an expert in kendo. And if you've ever watched kendo, their explosive footwork, I mean, they're the masters of bridging the gap at super speed. And then when you look at Shotokan karate and how they move in long, deep, explosive stances, well, it's a well-known fact that Gigo took a lot of that footwork, which became standard footwork in Shotokan, from kendo. Okay, so that bridging the gap. And because that range is so much bigger, well, then your defensive shape in the stand-up has to be different too. So the further back you go, the further your arms come out, the further down they can go. You don't have to be up here if he's 5 meters away. But you still have to be aware, because their ability to bridge the gap with those long oi skis is quite phenomenal. So the kick range has a certain defensive shape. The position of your legs and everything is different. The hand range has different shape. The headbutt elbow range, you have to bring the hands up for the elbows, drop the head down for the headbutts. That's from my experience. Whenever I've had to deal with headbutts, my buddy Steve Ketz is here. I know Ketz and I trained in Brisbane, and he's got a lot of good buddies who have also got monstrous amounts of experience in the street, and he could give me his viewpoint too. But from my experience, elbows are dealt with high hands, headbutts are dealt with low heads. You have to get your head lower, which means you don't bob into it, of course, because you just get punched. You drop your stance and drop the height so that your level is low. Ketz and I both got a buddy named Nick Hughes. We've mentioned Nick. He's the one that wrote that phenomenal book on self-defense. And let's see if I can find that link for you. But everyone should read this book. It's absolutely required reading for my students. I know that. I haven't got the Nick interview. I'm looking for that book. I don't have it. I'm sorry, my bad. But look up Nick Hughes. I've mentioned before, you should all have the ebook, How to Be Your Own Bodyguard. He's my buddy, and Steve Ketz's buddy, who took out the 22 skinheads, which of course is absolutely as unbelievable as the idea of some of the things that Salsai did. But he had police witnesses, and there is a police record of it. And in the book, he says that I wouldn't have told anyone, except there was a police witness, and he gives a policeman's name, number, and station. So if you want to go, you can check the record out. But my feeling is, I should ask Nick. In fact, I will. My feeling is Nick hardly used headbutts. Ketz, were you ever there when Nick was getting involved in a little bit of a tussle? But I have a feeling Nick didn't use headbutts because he was about 6'8". So it'd be very difficult for him to get underneath unless he was grabbing them from under and coming up like that, which of course one of the best things. Yeah, 100%. Oh, good. I'm glad, Rochelle. And he's got that app too, which gives you ongoing, lots of ongoing self-preservation. You know, the self-protection and self-defense are different. And Nick points the difference out in his book. Self-protection is all the soft skills that you use to survive in a situation. So you walk into a room, you check the exits, you see someone who's a bit fishy, you size everything up, you take the time to secure your house. When you park your car, you park it in a certain area. When you approach your car, you make sure you check that it's safe around you. All these things are self-protection. They're the soft skills. Self-defense are the hard fighting skills. Okay, so anyway, Nick talks about that. Nick he says on his own website, he's a veteran of over 2,000 street encounters, and he probably hasn't had a street fight for 20 years. He's very highly regarded by anyone you can name. They all would rate him as one of the top 5 or 6 in the world. So his book's well worth getting. So anyway, range 1, kicks, punches, headbutt, elbow, stand-up grapple. Survival shape in the stand-up grapple is good balance and good posture. Because as soon as your posture is taken away, and I mean there's your defensive gaze, your dominant head position, a wrestler will come in, put his head right here. And as soon as he can do that, he's stolen your ability to maintain posture, and within half a second, you'll be on the ground. And that's the objective of the range 4, is to get you on the ground by breaking balance. So they'll use collar ties, they'll use underhooks, collar ties, defensive drags and things like that. And the best way to get a handle on defensive shapes is to understand the shapes that you need by understanding the potential attacks that are coming. So this is why we work the 8 fundamental punches, the 8 fundamental kicks. That gives you the defensive shape for the first and second range, and also to a degree the third range, because we work the elbows in that. The stand-up range 4, then you have to work your fundamental skills, and they can be narrowed down to maybe just a handful of skills, quite literally. How to defend the double leg, how to defend the single leg, how to defend the collar tie, how to defend the underhook, how to defend the arm drag, and how to defend the 2-on-1. So there's 6 basic skills, six basic skills. Yeah, not so popular now because the legal ramifications are pretty heavy. But Ketz is just mentioning there that Shane Cleese, one of the guys Ketzy got his black belt from and we all trained with, I used to share a house with him. We do headbutt drills, so you wouldn't get caught cold. The key is to understand the body language and the body shapes. And like Mike said there, if you don't see it, it's all over. Yeah, Nick liked to experiment with his kata and his karate. Nick will tell you too that he, like I said, he had 2,000 street fights, and he'll probably tell you that of those, about 1,900 were done from kata. He was actually using kata technique as he was fighting. So whenever anyone says that kata are a waste of time, they don't work, go and have a word to Nick Hughes. So in the stand-up, you can literally narrow down your fundamental key defenses to understanding 6 core skills. And they are how to defend against the double leg, the single leg, the underhook, the collar tie, the arm drag, and the 2-on-1. The 2-on-1 is the 2-on-1 arm. So if you can develop a good solid body of skill in those 6, not only will you be able to teach them with proficiency to your karate students, you'll be able to defend as well, okay, because you can't do one without the other. You can't pretend to be able to defend a double leg if you can't do a double leg, simply because you won't feel the same body language. Okay, then you go to the ground. When you get on the ground, it's a different kettle of fish and everything changes. Okay, now we've narrowed down the groundwork to basically 10 or 11 fundamental shapes on the ground, and we'll go through those on Wednesday for you. But essentially you have control from the side, control with the knee in your belly, control with them mounted on top of you, control with them mounted on your back, control with them with their legs around you closed, control with their legs around you open, control with one leg around you, one leg in, the turtle position where you're turtled up into all fours, and what we call the kesagatame. Kesagatame is the great equalizer. And if you've done any judo, you'll know how powerfully debilitating kesagatame is. I've demonstrated it to you before. It literally means the kesa is the collar, so it literally means the scarf hold. And my buddy Mick Jones, shout out to Mick, he'll probably be watching this at one stage. He's a police officer who worked in a remote part of Queensland. He had to wait an hour and a quarter for aid assistance to come from another police station. It's an hour and a quarter to the next town. And he held the guy down, this violent guy who'd gone nuts on drugs, held him down in kesagatame for an hour and a quarter. So it's very, very strong. Now, they're the main positions: side control, knee ride, mount, back, full guard, open guard, half guard, turtle, kesagatame, and one I forgot there. But all you need to do on the ground, when I say all you need to do, there are obviously guys who are just so good, there is nothing you can do unless you are as equally trained. And I know they're so good because they compete against the other best grapplers in the world, and there's nothing they can do. There's a guy named Roger Gracie, and he's won, I think, 5, 6, 7, 8 world Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu titles with basically one position and one technique. And everyone knows he's going to do it, but no one can do anything about it. He's that good. Okay, so that's not our objective. If you want to, some of my students compete in grappling, and that's become, we have one buddy, Aaron, shout out to Aaron in Japan. Aaron could no longer compete in Kyokushin because of his open heart surgery. So the impact was too dangerous for his heart condition. He had a number of open heart surgeries from when he was a youngster. So he competes in grappling now, represents the dojo in grappling, does very well. Medals all the time, beats the BJJ guys all the time. Now, when you get on the ground, you have those key positions, and each of them has fundamental survival shapes. Now, there's essentially 2 forms. One is the survival shape for competition, which is all very well if that's what you want to do. It's just like Kyokushin. The survival shape in the stance for a Kyokushin tournament is very different to the survival shape in the street where they're going to headbutt, elbow, and punch you in the face. Okay, so in BJJ, it has the same thing. There's, in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, there are certain shapes that are really, really good for tournaments, and there are other shapes that are really, really good for when the guy has the potential of hitting you. Essentially, the key is to control the inside position. Even when we're talking about Masayama, remember he was talking about superior airspace. He used that Air Force term of dominating with superior airspace. And that was a really good term. I love that term. Oishi taught that to me from Solsai as well. So on the ground, you're looking to control the space, controlling the space, and essentially the inside position. So these days, there's different positions like, for example, 50-50, where the 2 guys have their legs essentially locked 50-50. So their legs are the same, but they're half in and half between each other's legs like that. Okay, so what you need to do there is a whole new level again. Okay, so that's another different shape. Different positions require different shapes, but the essential fundamental of controlling these shapes is dominating the inside position. So when Ben comes on Wednesday, I'll show you, for example, that there are certain fundamental shapes, for example, defending against side control, where you go under and dig and get his collar tie. The problem with that is his arm's here, so if he was in a real situation, he'd punch your lights out. So you have to learn to come back in and maintain inside control. And so a lot of the stuff that we do, being karate guys, is more about dominating the inside control and allowing you to get back up again. Okay. my legs are asleep. I've been sitting here in Cesar for 40 minutes, and it's when you sit in Cesar and your foot just feels like nothing. There's nothing there. You know it's there, but you got no feeling. Well, it's a little bit like that. But I do want to show you what I mean with, if I can, with a single person on the ground. I'm crawling because I can't. If I stand up, I'll fall over. Okay, how's that? Yeah, so you can see me here. So in a side control position, if you can imagine, someone is lying on top of me here. Okay? Quite common is I'll have my arm at the back of their shoulder because their shoulder's here, their arms around my head. So I'll have my arm at the back of their shoulder to pull the pressure off, and I'll have this far side arm underneath in an underhook. Now, all that is designed for as I get on my side is to alleviate pressure. If I'm here, pressure's down, their shoulders in my face, and they're driving that, using gravity, driving that weight down. Some people will literally black out from the pressure. Okay, so the first thing you need to do to survive on the ground is to alleviate pressure. And we have an acronym, as you know. I'm the king of acronyms. Look at my foot, it's so dead. The acronym is OY, boys. OY, A-O-Y, boys, B-O-Y-S. Off your back, on your side. That's what that means. So whenever you're on the ground, never be on your back. Always get off your back and on your side. So that means as they come to attack and put pressure on, first thing I do is turn to my side. Protect my inside space. In the BJJ grapple, I'll come underhook here and have that underhook because it's very good as an escape. And then I'll have this arm here pulling, making sure that pressure's off my shoulder. Or ideally, I'll have my arm here to stop them from getting that arm around my head, if you can use your imagination. The problem with this, and that arm is very, very effective for tournaments as well as the street. The problem with this is, one, he has a head-to-head budget. Right there, all he has to do is just go kaboom, and he headbutts you, and then everything goes soft. Two, with the underhook here, this arm is free to hit. And he doesn't have to do anything other than just keep bothering you and hitting you, and before long, you'll start to feel it. So you have to change your shape. So to do that, you'll reclaim superior airspace. The airspace is between you and him. So you'll reclaim that by coming inside now. Instead of getting underhook, overhook, you'll go inside, and you'll create the shape, the frames here. And then when you're in a position to get back up again, I'll teach the guys to push on the side of the face, because if I push square on the face, if you push someone square on the face, their neck is strong, and they'll just maintain it. You push them on the side of the face, they have zero resistance. So I push on the side of the face, pendulum, come up to stand. Okay, that's claiming that inside space. We actually call it the prayer position, because you're like this and you're praying, and the hands are soft but active to stop them from being able to punch you. So the objective in this position is not just to avoid the pressure and survive the shape. The objective is now to avoid the punch, to stop being punched out cold. Okay, and that's very, very important as well in that shape. The last place you ever want to be is on the ground for too long. So all our survival shapes are about, I'm just going to come back up again. All our survival shapes are about surviving, escaping, and getting back to your feet. That's very important. Yeah, well, that's true. That's, of course, it's a cultural thing. Fighting is a cultural thing. This is why in Australia we don't have a wrestling culture. It's only since over probably the last 20 to 25 years that people have even started to get a concept of wrestling. When you're kids, wrestling was something that Mario Milano and Killer Carl Cox and Brute Bernardo did on Friday night wrestling on TV. Okay, but in terms of culture, the reason we don't have a wrestling culture, and I'm guessing South Africa is similar, is because we have a rugby league and a rugby union culture. In England, of course, they have the catch as catch can and all that sort of wrestling. So it's another level again. And they're very nasty with what they can do. But they can only do it if they can get their hands on you. So the objective should always be, with your survival, is to create space, control the airspace, create space, get back up again to the stand-up. It's funny you should say that, Clarence. I'll tell you a really good story. I've got, and I was just talking about this the other day. If Christian, my nephew Chris Dunn is here, he'll always, yeah, that's the other thing, of course, is weapons. And grappling with a mind on weapons is another level again. And it's something where honestly we've done very little of in the dojo, but we're starting to work on more. Is for one level, dealing with someone grappling you when you have a weapon. In other words, working with police officers, and they have to maintain control of their sidearm. That's one thing. Another thing is when they have the potential of having a hidden weapon. And I've seen some pretty graphic videos where guys have taken someone down and think they have them in control, and they just reach into their boot and just pull out a stiletto knife and just start to stab them to death. So you have to be conscious of that. That's a really good point, Clarence. It's a terrible thing to think, but it's very true. Lost my train of thought when I saw that. But yes, you know, if you've got to, there are certain ways that you can train. Is you can actually have the guy with a knife, you know, a practice knife, if you like, hidden in his shoe or hidden in his belt or in his gi. And you have to monitor, not only are you controlling the airspace, you're also monitoring the arm movements. So if you were to capture this arm, say for an arm lock, you come up, you've got a really good arm lock, but this arm around here just stabs you to death. Okay, so you have to be able to maintain control of that arm with your legs whilst you work this arm with the arm bar. So it introduces a whole new range. Give me your comments about this. I'm very interested in this. But for the stand-up, when Ben comes on Wednesday, we'll go through the different ranges and the survival shapes. Because the fact of the matter is, survival shapes allow you to better deal with sneakiness. You know, the art of war says the art of war is deception. Okay, so deception is your ability to get your weapon on him before his defense stops it. That's been sneaky. It takes sneakiness. You know, you have to be deceptive. You're not going to be able to simply walk up to a half-experienced fighter and pop them with an easy punch. You've got to be deceptive. And street fighters and so on are very deceptive because that's their game. Okay, they don't play by rules. The danger of karate is that we spend our life playing by rules. And so in our head, we're not prepared for the violent, sneaky street fighter who will snipe attack you in any way he can. One of the wrestling in the second match, Haystacks, did a belly flop and collapse. You know, I've actually refereed a fight night exactly like that. We had a fight night in an octagon in a cage, and I was refereeing. And then between two fights, we had some parkour guys doing this amazing demo, and they were actually doing parkour around the arena. And then they ended up parkouring into the ring, and one of them did this huge double backflip off the top of the fence and went straight through the ring. And they had to stop the fights till it was all fixed again. It wasn't very popular with the promoters. But anyway, so in the stand-up with survival, there's a couple of different ways that you survive. The first one is your technique. Okay, so Shingitai. Whenever Mike's name pops up, I think of Shingitai. The mind, the technique, and the body. All of them represent different ways of survival. Self-protection, or the soft skills, is Shin, is the mind. You should be able to neutralize the outcome before it even starts by not just by being able to talk yourself out of it with verbal judo, as they call it, but also through using your brain and picking up the vibe when something's fishy and getting the heck out of there before it starts. When I was young, I went to the wrestling and they said, oh, yes, good. I had a road rager threaten my life 3 days ago. I told him, yes, we can fight, but you'll have to follow me to the police station and we'll do it there. Yeah, exactly. That, of course, that's the best way to do it. I remember once I was at some street lights just down the road, actually, and this crazy guy was yelling and abusing, and he abused an old lady in a car and cut her off, and he pulled up right next to me. And I said, hey, Buster, why don't you pick on someone your own size? And he's going, yeah, expletive deleted. You want to go? You want to go? I said, yeah, sure, I'll be happy to. He says, all right, come on. I said, well, you pull up over there. I'll be right there. And it was a really busy 4-lane road. And he's taken off and he's pulled out and he's got out of his car. And I just went past waving and just kept driving. And I just waved at him. Anyway, my solution to road rage is blow kisses. Yeah, thank you. Like that. So anyway, Shin-gi Tai, all of them have different approaches. Yeah, you do. You tend to be more considerate of a guy. I remember I got into a fight once and I thigh kicked a guy and he ended up flying across the road and I followed him and he was cowering down and I was standing over him with my hand on his head and there was absolutely no point in doing it. He says, I don't want any more trouble. There's so often fights will end like that is because I was small for a street fighter, for a bouncer. Guys that get very aggressive and aggro and you know, and then you'd whack one or two of them, you knock a couple of guys out, and the third guy all of a sudden's going, I don't want any trouble. You know, so they deserve a good whack, but you just feel sorry for them. That's true, Mike. Good on you. I'm glad to see that. That's how it should be. Okay, Shin-gi Tai in survival shapes. The shin, the mental, that's your soft skills. That's being able to be environmentally aware, talking yourself out of it, not even entering the situation when you see troubles brewing, when things look fishy up there, cross up over there, that sort of thing. And like Abisman says, just drive to the police station. Don't stop until you drive to the police station. That's a good one too, okay? Then you have the technical ability to survive. And the technical ability comes from controlling distance, controlling angles, and controlling the timing. Okay, so I mean, if you can constantly keep him at your optimal distance, but keep him away from his optimal distance, well, that's your first step to controlling and surviving. Okay, and you do that, make sure you maintain your dominant head position always, but you maintain control of the angle. And then your footwork allows you to control the distance. And if you can control angle and distance, you can control timing. Okay, that's where the sneakiness comes in. If their sneakiness is such that they can deceive you, well, that's a timing thing. What they're doing is just deceiving your timing. They're deceiving your ability to control the timing. Okay, and then your defensive skills also include that. So not only your distance, angles, and timing, but also your defensive skills, which starts off at the core 54 with the 8 fundamental punches and the 8 fundamental defensive shapes, and the same with the 8 fundamental kicks and the 8 fundamental defensive shapes against those kicks. The inside, remember, you go into range 4, then you have to control. You have to have an idea to control the defense in 6 fundamental core skills: the double leg, the single leg, the collar tie, the underhook, which is the pummel, the underhook, the arm drag, and the 2-on-1. If you can control those, then it's much harder for him to do anything. He's not going to be able to get a leg sweep on if he can't control your upper body. Karate guys are different. A good karate guy can go crack and double thigh kick you very well. In fact, one of my instructors over the years, Brian Ellison, was a great fighter in his day. A lot of Kyokushin guys in Australia know of him. But he was a little guy, but he was super explosive. And I remember he got into a situation where a guy attacked him with a piece of 2x2, the council hardwood posts that they used to hold trees up. This guy came and swung at him. He went under that and thigh kicked the guy, and he dislodged 6 inches of femur from one leg and broke the knee of the other leg. So he broke both his legs with one thigh kick. So that's adrenaline for you, but also that goes to show that you need to have good defense against leg kicks. I thought it was only me. For days afterwards, I think about what I could have done to avoid it. Sometimes I even think about going back to apologise. Well, I just avoid the situation altogether. Apologise first, Clarence. Worry about that. Just apologise, say you made a mistake. Nick talks about that in his book. If some aggressive guy looks at you and goes, "What are you looking at, you son of a gun?" You just say, "Are you Pete from Miami High School?" "No." "Oh, man, you got a dead ringer. Sorry, man." And then you give him a high five and shake his hand and say, "For a second, I thought you were my old classmate Pete from Miami High School." Things like that. That's a good way to do it. Okay. Now the next survival skill that you need is the physical survival skills. Okay, and that's resilience. That's being able to take a good shot. I was pretty good at taking a shot in my day. Probably I could get blown over by a small gust of wind today. But I remember once I got king hit by someone, and it really made me dizzy, but I just turned around and as calmly as I could said, "Are you all right? Did you slip over or something?" And it was enough to annoy the hell out of him, and he just walked away. But if I was not able to take that shot, he would have knocked me out, and God knows what he would have done if I was on the ground. I've even mentioned that in the book. There's nothing more intimidating than hitting a guy with what you know is your best shot, and then he's just standing there smiling at you. So that resilience, that ability to take a shot is really vital. You're not going to get anywhere in tournaments or in a real fight unless you can take a good shot. And that's not just in your body, but in your legs and also in your neck. It's very hard to make your face strong, but you can take a good shot in the head by making your neck strong, because it's the neck that will contain the head to stop the brain from splashing around and cause the knockout. And of course, everything comes from that fundamental, primary default position. So, my legs. Okay, so default position, we've been through it before. Most important thing, your knees are bent. You can't be legs straight with heels on the ground. That'll work for wrestling, both heels on the ground. But even good wrestlers will often have one heel. See that? And like that. Okay, you have a look up Olympic wrestler, and they'll touch, and then the first thing will happen is they'll do this, and they're moving around, because they've got to get that explosive drive off the leg. But sometimes in the stand-up range 4, you want to have both heels on the ground because you need the balance. Sumo wrestlers, for example, they'll spend a long time working this suriashi. They call it suriashi, which is the technique that they work not to lift their heels off the ground. They literally don't want to lift their heels off the ground, because if you can't get the heels off the ground, you can't beat them. The rules say that there has to be 3-point contact, and you want to throw them. If you can't get their heels off the ground, you're not going to be able to push them over. It's that simple. So they work on making their feet always heavy on the ground. In karate, we work on nice knee bend, nice bent knees, and the back heel off the ground. Sometimes the front heel off the ground. When I'm moving and they throw that, say, spin back kick, and I want to move away, I'll go like this. Look, now this heel's off the ground, and I'll move off. Okay, so generally speaking, the first rule is lift one heel off the ground. It's Sanshin. Look, Sanshin stance right there. Cool. I was watching a thing online just the other day, and someone was explaining a stance of some fighting system, completely unrelated to anything, and it was virtually Sanshin. The whole thing was Sanshin, explaining Sanshin stance. Boxing, Sanshin. Okay, so there's your Sanshin. Knees are in. In Kyokushin, you can't afford to have the heel there, the foot there like this. A lot of fighters will do that. Boxing will have a long stance, because that allows it good footwork, and then they can throw the power punch. But it's nothing for them to bend the foot at that angle. Some fighting arts will bend the foot here like this. Taekwondo will even fight to the side. But the problem with that is you're wide open for leg kicks. Now, if the fighter knows that and knows what to do about it, they can use that to their advantage. They can literally just go, boom, take the kick. Andy Hawk used to take the kick and then bring and come down with the axe kick. Another guy I refereed years ago, he literally sucked guys in, come in like this, and he'd turn, and they'd fly kick him, and he'd go and knock him out with a spin back kick, a spin elbow, or a spin back kick. He'd let them kick him. Spin back fist like that, or spin back kick even as they hit the fly kick. Okay, so heel off the ground, knees in, elbows forward. Forget the hands before you forget the elbows. Forget the hands. Have the hands up, the elbows out, doesn't do anything. But if you get the elbows right, then the hands will be in position. So the hands belong between you and him. The hands belong between you and your opponent. There's your, we call it under the bridge. Get used to the hands being up. I like to put the thumb on the cheekbone even, if you're in that position. As you move out of range, the hands come away a little bit to deal with the kicks better. It's hard to deal with the kicks if your hands are too close and you're too close to them. Move away. Cox comb. Fundamental shapes. We'll go over this on Wednesday. Your dominant head position. Your gaze and your dominant head position are really important for survival, because as soon as your head goes off angle, your balance goes and your direction goes. So all your fighting stance is always making sure that that head is dominant all the time. Doesn't matter where you are. Moving forward, moving back. Make sure the head is always square on. Don't start to look out the corner of your eye, because the focal distance is different and you get an error in perception. So we call it default position because that's a position you return to every time. What have we got here? Clarence. Yeah, we're learning. Okay, so it's very exciting to have Ben come up again. He's working full time now. It's great that he's got a job. I hope everyone's safe from the virus. If anyone's in Victoria, look after yourself. $200,000 in fines, and I think every fine is worth it. They had a group of 20-somethings in a car wanting to go over the border to a friend's party. There was border crossing. Everyone's been told don't cross the border, and they see the police, so they back off, and then they decide that they left the car and they're going to walk through the back streets and get over the border that way. And they all got busted and got fined $4,000 each, and now they're crying poor. It's not fair. Gosh, we've got to do something about this virus. So anyway, if you're in Victoria, stay safe. It's really important to stay safe. Wednesday, it's exciting for me. Ben doesn't get time off very often, but he's got Wednesday off, so he's coming up to do the podcast, do the stream with me, and we're going to cover the fundamentals. Not just the fundamental shapes, we'll also cover the 8 fundamental hand techniques, the 8 fundamental kicks, the survival shapes for each of those, and then the 5 fundamental, or the 6 fundamental range 4 grappling drills. We have drills that we work on all of them. We'll do those for you, and then we'll cover the survival shapes of the different positions on the ground. So you have those ground positions that you have to be at least conscious of. It doesn't mean you have to be the best in the world at it, and there's always going to be someone who's better at you than the grappling. It's just like as a karate person, when you watch, for example, a grappler or someone go, well, this is how you defend against a karate punch, and then they do something which doesn't even closely resemble a karate punch, and all you do is you get annoyed. Well, no, that's not how you do a karate punch. Why don't you get a karate guy to do a karate punch? Well, it's the same with karate guys dealing with grappling, for crying out loud. We do it all the time. We go, well, if they do this, you're just going to do that. I mean, some of the worst teaching I've ever seen is karate guys saying how to defend against a double leg. And the only people in the world who would do a double leg the way they're defending against is them. Because if anyone knows how to do a double leg, they're not going to do it that badly. Okay, so that's one of the things that I've always tried to do, at least to the best of my ability, is when I wanted to learn how to grapple, well, I went and trained with the best grapplers in the world. I was trained with Randy Couture and Dan Henderson and Rico Chiapparelli, their wrestling coach, and John Donahue. My coach, John Donahue, is one of the best BJJ coaches in the world, and he introduced me to his coaches. Well, actually, I met him. It's a long story, but I met him after a long break. He'd been living in America for a while, and I had started to train at the Machado Brothers BJJ school, and then one day, Purple Belt says, "Hey, where are you from?" I said, "Australia." He says, "Oh, me too." I said, "I know you." And he'd been living in America for 7 or 8 years. So, yeah, I remember you. You brought out Bill Wallace, and I sponsored the Queensland section of the tour. You're John Donahue, and we remembered then. But anyway, so he became my grappling coach after that. But what I'm trying to say is, if you want to learn how to grapple, go and see a grappler. Don't go to a karate guy who thinks he knows how to grapple. Okay, it's just the fact of life. I mean, if that karate guy is a black belt in BJJ or has been training for long enough, well, then by all means. But generally speaking, the worst thing you can do is go to your karate teacher who has no wrestling, grappling, range 4, range 5 experience, and ask him what to do, because they just will not have the answer. Okay, we have to cover those ranges. So when Ben comes on Wednesday, same time, 3 o'clock, I'm going to cover all the stand-up fundamental skills and the survival shapes for all the different positions you'll find yourself in. And I think you'll really enjoy it, because Ben moves very well. He's much younger than me, much better looking, and he really does get a handle on what I'm trying to explain. So thank you, guys. Appreciate your presence very much. Went a little longer than I thought, but I hope you got something out of that. Of course, thanks, Marco. Good to see you. Don't forget, please put the word out. Try and, I mean, I don't know how many friends you got on Facebook, but just take the link and push it out there and share it on Facebook, because the best thing that we can do to get this out is to share it to people. Hit like, hit subscribe, leave a message below later on when it comes visible. Thanks, Daniel. Good on you. I'm looking forward to catching up with you soon when I get back down there, as soon as the virus is all sorted. Those Aussies who want their logbook, don't forget, let me know. I'll be putting the order page up on the web page as soon as possible. I'm really loving mine. It's great to be back using it again after using a notepad for a fair while. Also, arigato gozaimashita. Thanks, Torbjörn. Thanks, buddy. Look, I'm so sorry about those books. Please forgive me. We'll work something out as soon as we can. Alan, thanks. Good on you. Harry, good to see you. Frederick, thanks, all the way from Sweden. Rochelle, thank you, from Canada. And Mike, Karl Kniep aus Deutschland. Good, danke schön, mein Freund. And Damien and Kenneth, good. Good to see you, folks. Thank you very much. See you Wednesday, 3 o'clock.